I think we say that 4% is infinitely higher than 0%. So I think if you think about it, D3 Datacast in some ways gave Trine an infinite chance of winning the championship.
Welcome to the D3 Datacast. Zach Snyder here, joined as always by my brother, Matt Snyder. Matt, we usually start with talking about who we think won the week, but I think we have a clear answer to that. We'll be diving in more about how and why the Trine Thunder certainly won the week. But we're back from Fort Wayne, Matt. We rolled into town. The sun was shining. It was like 70 something degrees. And by the time we left, though, the icy winds were blowing. That's the way it can go in this part of the country in March. But it was a great weekend nonetheless. And Matt, there's a group of people we want to start by recognizing, thanking, because ultimately I think this is the crew that's the driving force behind another great weekend in Fort Wayne, and that's the National Committee. So we've got a picture here. We stole off of Coach David McGrail's Twitter tweet, and he's the representative from Region 7 on the National Committee. And we have all 10 members listed and shown here. Matt, a few other shout outs not listed here that I think are really instrumental in the type of weekend we got. Jim Haney, National Coordinator of Officials for Division 3. It just can't be understated how much he cares about the division as a whole, the product. We got great officiating, I thought, all weekend long, and he is certainly one of the big reasons behind that. Sarah Kowachaki was in town. Helping, some of the officiating stuff with Jim. John Painter came up from Maryville College. He was back again coordinating some of the media stuff. He does a great job.
Awesome job.
Making sure we have what we need as people there covering the event as media. He does an awesome job helping to keep the post-game press conferences moving. There's a whole team of people that care deeply about Division III basketball, deeply about giving the student athletes or the teams that are participating a top-notch quality experience at the Final Four. That's evident in the arena, that it's evident for like media people like us who show up and have just a tremendous experience covering the event. Matt, this is the second time we've been able to go as media, and it's first class. They do a great job, and tip of the cap to all involved.
Yeah, an incredible weekend, as you said, Zach, an incredible venue. We had a great atmosphere this weekend. I'm sure we'll talk about that as we go forward. And as you said, these people on the screen here, especially the National Committee, they do such a great job. They put in so much work throughout the season, especially throughout the tournament to get things going leading up to the tournament, led by Luke Flakertzy there. I think also vice chairs this year were Cam Fuller and Doc Esslinger, I think, if I have those two correct. But they just do so much work. They care so much about Division III. And we appreciate all that goes into organizing and running a tournament like this. That's a lot.
Absolutely. All right, let's move into the games we saw, Matt. We talked about this Final Four heading into the Final Four last week. We kind of previewed it, looking at the odds and where these teams stacked up in terms of the efficiency ranks based on efficiency margin. All that ranking information we track on d3datacast.com. It was a stacked field, Matt. Hampton-Sydney entered the number 1 efficiency rating team, matched up with Guilford, the number 4 efficiency rated team. Let's just start with that. That was the first semifinal of the game. Big time matchup, Matt. Is for people who live in Michigan, right? We don't see ODAC games in person. And you know what? It was great to be able to see a high-level ODAC game in person like this. But as I was watching it, I wasn't thinking like, oh, this is a great ODAC game. It was just a great, hard-fought, well-contested semifinal game. Like, it was just a game worthy of a national semifinal.
Yeah, I thought we were going to a basketball tournament, but right away a rugby game broke out, I think, between Hampton-Sydney and Guilford. Players were hitting the deck almost on every time down the court, every loose ball, every rebound. It was a battle out there. I think the officials really let them play in the first game. I enjoyed that. I don't think it was, we make a joke about being a football game or rugby game. I don't think it was overly violent or overly physical, but I think it was appropriately physical. And I think it was generally called a very good game as well. This was just a good game. I think we thought it was going to be kind of more on the defensive struggle side of things. And I think that's what it was. really, I think, low scoring first half. Guilford, I think, fought to a 1 point lead at halftime. And there was even a point in the game's second half. Guilford had just drawn a 7 point lead, which was the largest lead of the game, I believe, at that point. About 7 minutes left. They had just made a 3-pointer with a foul down low as the shot was going in to give them the ball back. And it really felt like maybe the game was going downhill in favor of Guilford, that maybe this thing was almost over. But of course, me thinking that right away meant I was ultimately wrong. Hampton City had a tremendous run, and really for kind of the first time all game, or so it felt, they really broke free offensively, and they went on a 17-2 run, I think it was, over about the next 5 minutes and change, to really take control of that game with just a couple of minutes left. And in the final 2 minutes, it was really clear that Guilford was not coming back. But yeah, that was a great game. They competed really hard, particularly on defense. There was very little room to work. They made shots tough on each other, and not many of those shots fell throughout the game. But it was a good one. I was happy to be able to watch it. Much respect for both teams, both programs, both coaches, and the players on both sides. But that was a good one to watch.
It was physical. It was physical all weekend, but it did feel like that right mix of just enough let them play, but never losing control of the game, right? We talked about the officiating. I thought was great all weekend. It seemed like that perfect balance of, we're in the Midwest. We tend to see more physical brand of basketball. It was there, but it wasn't like it never got out of control, and we didn't have 60 fouls in the game.
Right.
So it was a good balance.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, Matt, Hampton Sydney, tremendous. Basically the last 8 minutes or so, it was like they found a different gear, and their best players were their best players, right? I mean, it was really led by Adam Brazel, Davidson Hubbard, Ryan Clements. They were tremendous down the stretch. And it's just like, I thought Guilford was tremendous too, but Hampton Sydney kind of entered the weekend and really entered the whole tournament as a favorite. And you could really see that championship medal coming through, I think, in those final minutes down the stretch. Very impressive. Really impressive what Guilford was able to do just throughout most of that game to make it a grind, but one that was actually really entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
All right, Matt. And as that game was playing out, the big Trine crowd was trickling in throughout the entire second half there of that first game. It was a tremendous crowd there Thursday night for Trine against Trinity. And Matt, Trine really got off to a great start. I think maybe a little bit surprising, going into the locker room up 12 at the half.
Yeah, I know. I think Trinity was well prepared for this game, but I don't think they knew what it felt like to play against a team like Trine until they were out there. And yeah, that first half, kind of the end of that first half, Trine really took control. I think, like you said, 12-point lead into the locker room, and it really felt like Trine had the big crowd behind them. They had a big lead. They had the momentum. Trine was really putting their foot down. They were really impressive right out of the gate here at the Final Four. As you can see from our percentages, the computer was lower on Trine than it was the other teams. Just about a 20% chance to even survive the first round. And then eventually you can see here just a 4% chance to win the championship. Zach, I think if the Trine players were aware of what this computer said, they maybe wouldn't have competed as hard, but they probably weren't, because they played out there just like they belonged, and they certainly did. They showed it. And that first half, out of the gate, boom, right into the locker room, they hit Trinity in the mouth. And credit to Trinity in the second half. I think they did respond. I think they cut the lead down to 4 a couple times, and maybe eventually 3 in the second half. But Trine never blinked. Even though they had a stretch there, maybe like an 8-minute stretch in the second half where they only scored a bucket or two, they were eventually, they kept going, they kept grinding, they let the defense, they kept that going. And then on the offensive side, they had a really nice stretch, a really invigorating stretch where Emmanuel Magnagalo got a block and then I think a dunk on the other end, really got the crowd. The crowd was good all night, but really reignited the crowd and really led Trine for those last, whatever it was, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes, and just put the hammer back down on Trinity after cutting the lead. And really, I mean, for most of the night on Thursday night, that game was all Trine, or at least it felt that way sitting there.
You mentioned that sequence by Magnaglo. That was right after he had picked up his fourth foul of the game too, right? He didn't come out of the game, had two of like the most impactful plays that he had all night. And don't get me wrong, his impact was felt, directly and indirectly for much of the night. But big from him. I thought Aiden Smiley was great all night. He was getting beat up, but I know at one point I looked down and he was the leading point scorer, leading rebounder, and had the most assists. I don't remember exactly what point it was in the game, but he was just doing it all for Trine. He was getting beat up while doing it. We mentioned it was a physical. This was a very similar game to what we saw in the first one, where it was physical, just enough let him play, but also not losing control of the game. Matt, it was interesting with that halftime lead. Trinity came out in the second half, and we get media timeouts every 4 minutes of play, and Trinity, after that first 4 minutes, had chipped away a little bit. After that second, the second media timeout, they had chipped away a little bit more. Third media timeout, chipped away a little bit more. And really, but the defense I think we saw from them over specifically that 12-minute stretch is more of what I expected to see from them throughout the whole game. Like, I feel like we didn't see them play that level of defense throughout that whole first half. And I think that was part of the reason Trine was able to get out to that lead. I think you're right. Maybe they didn't know exactly what to expect, and maybe they were caught off a little bit off guard. Trine has, quick guards. Yeah. They're a great passing team. There's not really like, it's not like you can key on a guy or two. They can really spread it around. They have options all over the floor. And I think that really impacted Trinity, and they had a harder time maybe settling into the game because of how balanced and how dynamic Trine can be.
Yeah, I think Trine's a team that is deceptively quick and also deceptively long. I don't think you always in Division III get that combination. Someone made a comment, someone from the media, I think it was maybe Ryan Scott of D3Hoops.com, made a comment that he didn't, you see the rosters and the heights listed, but he didn't fully realize how that Trine was as big as they were until he saw them up close and in person. I think that's true. I think a player like Aiden Smiley, to me, is like number one on that. He doesn't look at first glance as physically imposing, but he's pretty quick, and he's pretty big, and he's pretty long, and he can play in the post or guard the post or be out on the wing. I think that's something Brooks Miller has said in post-game press conferences and now on like Hoopsville and on QCast, that a player like Aiden Smiley can do so many things for them. Trine has so many players that do a lot of things. Fred Garland, Cortez Garland, Aiden Smiley, Nate Tucker, Manuel Bignangelo, Brent Cox had some really good moments in this Trinity game. In particular, he was like, I know he's been dealing with some injuries and things down the stretch here, but he was like peak prime Brent Cox, I think, for this night. Really led them to some good things. I think it's really tough to beat a Trine team like that when they have all of these players all playing at their full potential all at once. They certainly did that in the Trinity game, and I think they certainly did that all weekend long.
Definitely carried them into the championship game, Matt, and that set up the big Saturday night. I think, said or not said, I think, neutral observers were kind of excited to see what kind of a crowd Trine could bring in for that Saturday night. Just being, 40 miles from campus, they've received great community support throughout the season, and just really glad to see that it led to a new Division III men's basketball championship game record for attendance. And it was a really exciting atmosphere, and it was really an exciting one to be able to take from floor level at the media table.
Definitely the best atmosphere. We've now been to Fort Wayne, you and I 3 years. This was the best atmosphere. It was pretty packed based on the configuration that they have for the men's basketball Division III Final Four. They opened up, I think, like the upper level that usually is curtained off. They had like Trine fans kind of filling the upper level on one of the sides there. The Trine band was there. The Trine cheerleaders were there. And then the Hampton-Sydney crowd, which we were impressed by all weekend long because Hampton-Sydney's a longer way away, and they had a nice little contingent. I think they stepped up their game to be even more vocal because of all of the Trine support. It was loud pregame, and during the game it was intense. It was a great it was a really, really great atmosphere. And I think I'm sure the particularly the Trine players appreciated it. But I bet there's a part of the Hampton Sydney players that also recognize and appreciate what the atmosphere was, even though it turned out to be like like a really true road game for them. But yeah, just shout out to the folks from Angola, from the Trine Thunder Nation. They really showed out, and they made that the best Fort Wayne Final Four that you and I had attended, I believe.
And I think we were interested to see what would happen in the game because while technically it's a neutral court game, it was going to be anything but a neutral court game.
Yeah.
We knew that was going to be a heavily pro Trine crowd. Some of the Hampton Sydney guys were asked about it in the press conference, and this is a veteran group. I thought their perspective was really interesting. They voiced a preference to have a really energetic filled arena. Even if that energy was going to be against them, they preferred that against, a neutral court, kind of dead gym, empty gym atmosphere. And we got to that first media timeout, Matt, in the championship game. And I felt like, okay, they got through that first 4 minutes, and I didn't feel like I saw any visible effects that the crowd was going to impact Hampton Sydney. So I felt like that was a good sign for them. And then, I think things got interesting there. Why don't you go ahead and explain kind of what we were thinking there earlier in the first half?
Yeah, well, like you said, I think early it was played kind of even, and then Hampton Sydney was the one that delivered the first kind of punch. They pulled out to I think it was a 19-10 lead, and I kind of turned to you at that point and I said, "Is this going to be already kind of danger time for Trine? Or do they need to watch out? Is Hampton Sydney going to get rolling here?" And you kind of looked around for a second, and I think you said no, and you pointed to the crowd and said they're still in it. They haven't gone flat. I think we're going to see something here. And you were right. The Trine faithful were not deflated at all, and I think Trine immediately from that point on responded with like a 13-0 run, and then retook their own lead. And you're absolutely right. Trine wasn't teetering on the edge there. Obviously, they did the work. They got the stops, they got the scores for that 13-0 run. But that was a moment that they needed. They didn't let that game get away from them early. And I think that crowd maintaining their enthusiasm through that first Hampton Sydney run, I think really helped Trine, help the players execute. The players did execute. And that pulled even at the end. Hampton Sydney was able to hit a 3-pointer at the break to take, I think, a 2-point lead. But the game was close from there on out. Trine had survived that first run, and then Trine was then themselves poised to make it a second half.
Yeah, I felt like if there was a team that needed to settle into the game, based on what we were seeing earlier on, it was more Trine than Hampton Sydney. There was a stretch where actually neither team could really score for much of that first half. And for the most part, it was just Hampton Sydney missing shots. But during that stretch, Trine was really turning the ball over a lot. I think midway through the first half, or somewhere, in that stretch, they had like 5 turnovers. Looking at the final box score, they finished with only 9. Right. So it's like once they stopped turning the ball over, kind of settled in, they started playing some really good ball. And I think especially important, right? You mentioned they went into the locker room down 2 at halftime. They came out and really landed maybe their first big punch right away to start that second half. And not that the game was won at that point, but they were able to get a little bit of separation, and it was kind of what they were able to hold through much of the second half, and then ultimately, putting the game away.
Yeah, and I think that second half was about Trine asserting themselves. Not that it became easy, but Zach, they ended up scoring, I think, 46 points in the second half. And after what we saw from Hampton Sydney, all season long, that first game against Guildford, they played tough defense. But I think you're right. I think somewhere toward the end of the first half or at halftime, Trine really found what their offense needed to do against Hampton Sydney, and they found ways to score the ball. Some of that was big players making big shots. I think at different points in the second half, I think Nate Tucker, Fred Garland, Cortez Garland, Aiden Smiley, each had a 3-pointer in that half, and each one of them felt like it was the end of a Hampton Sydney push or a little bit of a run. Like maybe Hampton Sydney would get a couple points closer, and then, Trine would attack or kick out or find a guy in a corner. I think Smiley's 3 was like a step back 3. they had big shots. They executed. They made those shots when they needed to, and there was a point. I was trying to figure out which point exactly this was. I think it was about 3 minutes to go. Hampton Sydney had kind of cut into the lead a couple of times, and they had, I think they had the lead down to 3. But then about a minute later, Trine had that all the way back up to 9. I think that was Fred Garland's 3-pointer to put them back up 9. Hampton Sydney is a veteran team. They seemed poised all night long. But at that point, to go back up 9 with about 3 minutes left, I kind of just sensed from Hampton Sydney, not that they panicked, but like maybe this isn't happening. Maybe Trine really does have our number. And I think, and Trine did. They were calm. They were collected. They were hitting their free throws. Post game, Coach Brooks Miller mentioned how the team has been talking all season long about staying calm, staying present in the moment. Trine down the stretch was 12 of their last 13 on free throws. They really stepped up to the line in the big moments. Hampton Sydney, that was the only way they were going to catch up, was can they get a rebound? Can they get a missed free throw? And Trine said no. They just calmly knocked them down. They took care of the ball. They rebounded, they defended, and that last, whatever it was, 3, 4, 5 minutes was just all Trine saying, you were the better team, so everyone thought coming in. But right now, tonight here, we are showing ourselves to be the better team, and we're going to prove it on the court.
There was a really interesting symmetry between game situations in the two games that Hampton Sydney played, right? Because it was about 7 or 8 minutes to go against Guilford, and they were down 7 or 8 points. Same point in the game, same situation, right? Against Trine, Hampton Sydney, 7 or 8 minutes to go. They were down about 7 or 8 points. In that first game against Guilford, Hampton Sydney's best players were able to step up and be the best players on the court. I really felt like the difference being in that game against Trine, it was just the wide variety of options and contributions that Trine was able to get from all sorts of people that were able to hold Hampton Sydney off. It just seemed like whoever's turn it was to make a big play, make a big shot for Trine, they made it all weekend long, right? Nate Tucker, we haven't even really talked about Nate Tucker too much in this, but he made big shots throughout the weekend. Didn't take the most shots, didn't make the most shots, but just seemed like, when it was his turn, he capitalized on it, right? Fred Garland hit a huge 3 late in that championship game. Cortez Garland was great all weekend and just really shined in that championship game. We talked about Aiden Smiley, Emmanuel Magnanglo, Brent Cox, like you talked about it earlier. He's probably, played a bigger role for them in previous years, but, injuries and other reasons, he hasn't had that big of a role, but he had some big moments this past weekend. So it's just, it was contributions from all over. And I think that's exactly what Trine is. They won the weekend by being exactly who they are. Really great conversation Bob Quillman had on the QCast that just dropped with Brooks Miller and Aiden Smiley. A couple interesting comments. Brooks felt like these were the 2 games that they were best all season in terms of executing. Aiden Smiley had a little account of just a conversation between him and a couple other players after the fact where they felt like this was the best defense they've played. And Matt, it's a solid group. It was no surprise that they were in the Final Four. You can look at that 4% number and pick them out there in terms of them being the underdog. But I really think that speaks more to just how good all season long the other teams have been. And Trine's been great all season long too. Ultimately, no matter what the odds are, any game, it's all about what you can do within that game to turn the odd. Ultimately, at the end of the game, the odds either become 0% or 100%. Yeah. And Trine did everything they needed to do in both games to turn that to 100%. It was just really impressive. I don't think you can leave the weekend without saying Trine was the best team that weekend, right?
Oh, 100%. And they're a team, being in the conference with Calvin, who we follow, we see Trine a whole bunch throughout the season. We follow the teams in our league. They're a team that started out really good. I think I put them 24 in my preseason top 25 ballot. I ranked them all season long. They started out good, but almost every week they continued to get better. They did have that little kind of, semi-rough patch where they lost to Olivet and they lost at home to Calvin, and they lost in the MIAA tournament. But coming into the tournament, they were a good team, and they had been a good team all season long. I think some of the ratings you see on the screen is how many good teams there are in Division III. But Trine was definitely one that also progressed as the season went along. They got even more cohesive as a team. They committed even more to their roles and to defending. And like you said, Zach, this weekend they executed on both ends of the court better than any team out there in the country, and that's why they're deserving to be the national champs.
Matt, another kind of narrative going on with Trine winning that I didn't really think about as much or didn't appreciate as much is, this isn't a team that came out of nowhere. You go back to like the COVID year that finished with there was no tournament, but we kind of got that cool like college basketball bowl game type event, right? They were number 2 in the polls, and they went out to Randolph-Macon and played. And then that first tournament coming out of COVID, Randolph-Macon had the veteran team. They were like the team on the mission. They went out and they won the national championship that they probably would have won or would have been favorites to win the year that the tournament was canceled, or at the very least the year that there was no tournament, right? And so there's a little bit of that element, I think, for this Trine team. Certainly some of the names that were on that Trine roster during the COVID year where there was no tournament aren't here. There's plenty of big contributors on this team that did win that weren't there back then. But guys like Brent Cox, Emmanuel Magnangelo were around, right? So they're kind of this bridge between that team that didn't have the chance that maybe would have been among the top seeds, right, if there had been a tournament, to this group that did get their chance. Finally, this was the first time Trine had ever been in the national tournament, and here they go. They win the whole thing, starting off their tournament experience with a perfect 6-0 record.
Yeah.
Matt, it was a heck of a weekend. So let's talk about a little bit of the individual awards. This is interesting. This is kind of cool, right? So one of the things we heard from Brooks Miller is just the style of play. We talked about how they get contributions from so many different guys, and he said that sometimes can cost them in terms of individual awards. But with them winning, certainly they were able to get some individual recognition to go along with a great team accomplishment. Cortez Garland named most outstanding player in the Final Four all-tournament team, joined on that all-tournament team by teammates Aiden Smiley and Nate Tucker. And then rounding out the 5-person Final Four all-tournament team, Adam Brazel from Hampton-Sydney and Julius Birch from Guilford.
Yeah, Zach, as that game was ending, the championship game, our little group at the media table had a vote for the all-tournament team. And it was almost hard, like Trine, we could eventually see was going to win this game. It got down to the last few minutes, and we're like, okay, Trine's winning. But it was almost hard to pick. Like, what players do you pick from Trine? Because they do get so many different contributions from so many different players. I think Cortez Garland, very, very deserving of most outstanding award. Earlier that day, he'd been named to a D3Hoops.com All-America team, right? Great season. Down the stretch, he was so big for Trine. 18 points in the second half, 9 for 9 from the free throw line. He had like a huge drive and one, I think, which was another one of those like swinging the tide moments. Cortez Garland was great. Players like Aiden Smiley was great all season long. He was kind of maybe one of their stat stuffers on the Thursday game, and he was getting beat up too at the same time and playing good defense. Nate Tucker, I think it was Thursday, and in the first half on Saturday, he like almost couldn't miss, and he wasn't shooting a ton, but when they needed a big shot and he had the ball, it was just like, boom, knock it down. There was that point toward the end of the game, and it's just like a bunch of guys for Trine with like 9 points or like 6 to 8 rebounds, and they were all doing so much. A guy like Magnangelo, who even when he wasn't coming up with blocked shots, you could tell a guy was getting to the rim and rushing it because he was scared that he was going to come over and get his shot blocked. It's a team like this is not surprising ultimately when they win the national championship, when they can get so many different contributions for so many different players. We haven't even mentioned all of them. Like Drew Moore had some big shots throughout the weekend, some big plays, big rebounds. It's so tough to say them all by name because of how many players came up at one point or another in a big spot.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we at least need to say the name Drew Moore, right? Because he also, just like all these other guys, when it was his turn to come up with a big play, he made it. And at this point, Matt, Trine went 7 deep in that championship game, and we have named all 7,
Okay,
and
good.
deservedly so, because they all contributed. When it was their time to shine, they did, and it was just impressive to see.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, that wraps up the weekend. Time to wrap up a year long of picks. Let's hit it.
Yeah, I went into this weekend behind you in the pick, so I was really trying to walk a tightrope here. The first game was Guilford plus 3.5. You had Hampton City, I had Guilford. Guilford did have a shot at the buzzer to cover this, but it ultimately did not go in, and you get the point for Hampton Sydney. Game 2, Trinity and Trine. This was a big line, 9.5. The computers really liked Trinity. You picked Trine. I went with Trinity to try to get some points back. I was proven to be absolutely incorrect. Like, Trine won this game by 10 points. It was like a 20-point swing from the line. Trine looked awesome in this game. You get the point there. And then the championship call your shot. We both correctly predicted Hampton City to get to the championship game. Neither of us picked even trying to get to the championship game. You get the point for Hampton Sydney being there, but neither of us picked the champion correctly. So you pointed out to me as we were kind of leaving our hotel, I think on Sunday morning, if I was trying to make up points, maybe the better play, well, in hindsight, it definitely was, but maybe the better play was just to pick Trine all weekend and try to make up the points there. And I think I would have won if I did that. So I should have thought about that. But yeah, again, amazing performance by the Thunder. The computer efficiency ratings saw them as the clear number 4. The way they played themselves on the court, they played themselves as the clear number 1 in this Final Four. So congrats to the Thunder.
I'll get to the good part.
So yeah, you finished 3-2. I was 1-4. So you're 54, 40, and 1 overall. Like, that's 5 games better than me. I was 49, 45, and 1. So you beat me by a full week. 5 points. Congrats to you, Zach. You get the crown. I got the crown last year unofficially because really Ryan Scott, friend of the show, Ryan Scott, beat us both last year. But you take the crown this year, Zach. So congratulations. After 2 years of doing the show, we are tied 1-1.
I guess we're gonna have to, do it a third year to break the tie.
What breaking news? 1 more year for D3 Datacast just to break the tie. We'll see how it goes.
All right, Matt. We had a final top 25 poll, of which you are a voter. Take us through it.
Yeah, so I ended up with Trine, no surprise, number 1 after the weekend. I think, for most of the season, we try to almost predict what will happen a little bit. Who do I think will win on a neutral court? Yada, yada. Well, this weekend we saw through the tournament, we saw Trine prove themselves to be the champions of the nation. Trine comes out number 1. I'm going to still stick with Hampton City, number 2. I've liked them all season long. They've had a really impressive run all season long, up to and through and including the Final Four. I think they were impressive there. For me, UW Platteville is going to slide in at number 3. That kind of miracle Elite 8 finish that Trine had, if it wasn't like you could sneeze, a player on the court could have sneezed differently, and maybe UW Platteville wins that, and they're in the championship weekend. Maybe they win the Final Four. Who knows? I thought they were really good all weekend long. I think up until the last minute or two of that Elite 8 game, they were one of the most impressive teams in the whole tournament. Unfortunately, they'd let that one slip through their fingers, but I still think they had a great season. Platteville, number 3 for me. And then the other 2 Final Four teams, Guilford and Trinity, 4 and 5. Again, really strong. They've been up there with the top teams in the country all season long. And then my top 10 rounds out with Calvin, John Carroll, Randolph-Macon, Keene State, and Christopher Newport. Then from 11 to, I guess I'll read the names for the podcast, folks. Williams, 11, Oswego State, 12, Rowan, 13, Tufts, 14, Case Western Reserve, 15. At number 16, Widener. Number 17, NYU. Number 18, Nebraska Wesleyan. Number 19, Hope. Number 20, Cal Lu. Number 21, Co. Number 22, Trinity, Texas. Number 23, Swarthmore. Number 24, Elmhurst. And number 25, Illinois Wesleyan.
All right. Any big points or tiers or anything you want to talk about in that, or just leave it at that?
I think we can kind of transition to a moment here, Zach, and just kind of like stop, take a breath, and kind of talk about maybe some of our overall reactions or takeaways from the season, just what we thought. I think for me, one thing is like parity at the top of the country. all the credit in the world to Trine, all the credit in the world to Hampton City, Guilford, and Trinity for getting to the Final Four. I think one thing we've been talking about all year long, which to me kind of proved true throughout the tournament, is that there were, I don't know, 8, 10, 12, maybe as far as 16 teams that were kind of a sort of similar quality that maybe could have gotten here. Some of the teams we saw in the Elite Eight, I already mentioned UW Platteville. Again, like a miracle finish away from being in the Final Four. Who knows? They could have won that thing. Christopher Newport played Guilford really tough. They could have been in the Final Four for the second straight year. We saw Calvin play Trinity in the Elite Eight. They were a team that was co-champions in the MIAA with Trine. They split with Trine. Calvin could have come to this weekend and made a bunch of noise. There's probably one more Elite Eight team that I'm immediately not thinking of right now. Was it Nebraska Wesleyan? They played Hampton Sydney. They had a good run through the tournament. Like, who knows if the Prairie Wolves get to the Final Four? There are other teams. There's Keene State, Oswego State. Williams made a good run. There was a lot of teams this year at the top of Division III that were of a similar quality. I don't think we just saw one or two or three or these four teams being far and away the best team in Division III. Almost like all of the Sweet 16 could have gotten to Fort Wayne and could have made a lot of noise there. There were so many good teams. That's what made this season so fun. A bunch of teams are kind of right there, and like if they return key pieces next year, they should think of themselves as like, hey, that could be us next year. And start to finish, November through the end of the season, so many teams were in that mix, playing high-level Division III basketball this year.
Yeah, I think I'm left with similar feelings to you. It's interesting. Look back a year. Trine and Guilford were two teams that were both really good and not in the tournament.
Yep.
Right? And then fast forward to this year, they both get in. They both make runs to the Final Four. Trine wins the whole thing. I think my big takeaway is that it's so hard to just get in the tournament.
Yeah.
And then it's so hard to get to the Final Four, right? If you get to the Final Four, we obviously Trine took a little bit of external motivation from being seen as like the big underdog, but it's not a fluke that they got there. We're long past the days of a bracket or a bracket of death.
Yeah,
there's very good balance throughout the bracket. No one's going to have an easy path. You get to the Final Four, you deserve it. You earned it. Yeah. There's going to be multiple challengers to get there. It's an accomplishment. It's a special accomplishment to get there. And it's a special accomplishment to win it. There's just so much depth of quality in Division III basketball right now on the national stage that, whether it's to the Final Four or comes up short, just any tournament run a team is able to make is special.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, Matt, to hear teams that are able to progress talk about it and how much it means to them to be able to win these games. But it's not for the reasons that you might think, right? Very consistently, we hear messages of, we won, and that got us another week together, right? We got to practice another week. We got to hang out together as a team another week, right? So there's a thrill in winning, but almost team to team, we hear very consistent message that how special it is that they just get to keep going, and that's really struck me because we've heard that so consistently now. Just getting to be in these press rooms at the Final Four.
Yeah, I think it was Ben Callahan Gold of Trinity in the postgame press conference after they had lost the semifinal said that the best season for him was, of course, getting to the Final Four. But again, it wasn't about making the Final Four, although I'm sure that was a huge deal. It was they got to be together for one more week as a team, make this trip as a team, and play another game as a team. One of the things Adam Brazel said after they had lost the final was that his big disappointment was, of course, losing the game, but also that this team is not going to be together anymore to play more games. So for a lot of the players, a lot of the coaches, they form a special bond, of course, traveling throughout the season, playing together. And for them, it's all about that sort of community, that sort of togetherness, getting one more game, one more weekend, one more practice together. And that's something, that's a perspective I gained last year for the first time being in the media room, in the press room. And I remind myself again of that this year. I'm glad you pointed that out, because that's like the biggest deal for these teams, these players, the student athletes. It's a great experience. It's great to be in the Final Four. You want to win a championship. You want to get there. You want to get every round you can. But being together as a team for these players, that I think that's the most special thing that they're going to remember in 10 years, 20 years, is about those trips that they made together, and about the bonds that they formed.
Yeah, I've really learned over the last couple of years that how much perspective there is with these teams, these players, that, winning is a means to an end, and that end is the people side of it, the connection, the getting to keep doing it. We we talked about those comments about getting to do it another day. We talk and it's just cool to be able to be there and see a whole community celebrate. It was big for the Miller family, just to be able to see them, the way that they were able to celebrate the special moments, special memories. So yeah, winning's a big deal, but it's not always for the reasons that you might think, and that's been an interesting perspective to get over the last couple of years. All right, Matt, any other final thoughts from this season?
Yeah, just again on the season on the whole, something that we've talked about the last couple of years. Obviously, we have one more season of the fifth year COVID eligibility, or one more main season of the fifth year COVID eligibility. I think that's something we see players graduating from their 4-year programs and either looking to stay for that fifth year or looking for another program that has maybe a graduate degree opportunity that they're looking for. I think that does. First of all, I'm so glad that those players get 4 full actual years of basketball that they signed up for, that they don't get robbed of a year for that kind of crazy half shutdown year that we had. It does alter the landscape a little bit, and I don't know that it's not really for good or for bad. I think for some programs, I think it's really good to be able to get some of these players in. Maybe they're a place that had trouble recruiting 4 years, or maybe it's being able to keep one of their guys. It does alter the landscape a little bit. I don't know if that contributes to some of that parity at the top that we had, that there's maybe more experienced players to go around in Division III, and that we have more programs in the mix. So for me, it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing that exists and will exist for one more year, and then after that, we might see the college basketball landscape change a little bit. So I think maybe one of my takeaways from this year is that I kind of expect next year to be to maybe mirror this year to a large degree, and have some similarities. So I'm expecting going into next year, at least like 40 more teams to be in that strong, solid top 25 mix. I think 3 seasons ago, or whatever, right before I became a top 25 voter, it seemed like it was hard to come up with 25 deserving teams to vote for every week. This year, it was a glut of top 25 teams. I think we'll see that again in the next year.
I think that after next year, we'll be in for some sort of new normal, right? I don't think the end of the COVID year means everything's going to feel exactly like it was before that. I think just across college sports, we're in a different era, with transfers, and there'll be some player movement. It'll just be interesting to see kind of what that new normal actually looks like. But yeah, for next year, we got one more year kind of the status quo, and it'll be interesting to see from there.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, one more mailbag for this season. Let's jump right back into it. We got the first question here from Drew. Thoughts on Allen County War Memorial Coliseum as the venue, that being the Final Four venue. Any rumblings? Did they bid again? Should it be moved to a smaller venue so black curtains aren't needed? Any place you'd like to try for 2 years in 2027 and 28? So, Matt, just real quickly, as far as rumblings, we have heard that, bids for the next bid cycle were due in early February, and it's our understanding that there were 6 bids submitted, but that Fort Wayne was not among them. So let's just talk about Fort Wayne, Matt. Fort Wayne will not be in the picture starting in 2027. We have 2 more years there. What are your thoughts on Fort Wayne?
I really like Allen County War Memorial Coliseum as a venue. To me, it is about the right size. We saw, what do we see? Just over 4,500 people for the championship game. And to a large degree, the available seating was full. That was like I guess I don't know what the specific configuration was with the black curtains and everything, but it feels like a big arena. With 4,500 people, it felt packed full. I think to me, that's about the right size. It doesn't feel too big. You want it to feel big, like it's a big deal, because it is a big deal event, but you don't want it to feel too big. And I think for the most part, for me, this arena does hit that sweet spot, especially this weekend with Trine there and all the crowd support that they had. We had a good crowd with like Wabash and Elmhurst a couple years ago. Maybe Mount Union Saturday had a decent crowd last year, but for last year's semifinals, I don't think was a great crowd. So it does feel really big then. But I think the size of the Coliseum and the quality of the Coliseum itself, to me, is good.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely didn't feel too big on Saturday night or even Thursday. And I don't think that the black curtains are a detriment. I think depending on the arena, they can, help make it feel like it is the right size. And I
Yeah.
feel like for the most part, that's the feeling I get sitting in there, um, in the Allen County War Memorial Coliseum. So I like the size. Um, yeah, would a slightly smaller building be a little bit better? It would, but man, I'm not sure like that building exists, right?
Yeah.
Because you want, like you said, you want it to feel like it has a good atmosphere, a championship atmosphere. But I feel like, if you're talking 5,000, 6,000 seat arena, like that, does that exist? I feel like at that point you're at
Yeah.
some on-campus location, and then are you sacrificing something that, gives it a championship or big game feel? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that that kind of venue exists. So in my mind, some kind of mid-sized city that would have like minor league hockey or a G League team, like I think that's the kind of
Yeah.
the right venue. I mean, you don't want to be in one of these like 20,000 seat
No,
stadiums
no.
because no matter what you do with curtains, it's going to feel too big. But I think something like what they have in Fort Wayne is the right size.
And I
Now,
would I would personally like an arena though that feels too big rather than an arena that feels like it's at a campus site, if that makes sense. That would
mhm.
feel, even if it was full, it would feel too small. I want it. I think there's a lot of the big arena feel that makes it feel special and make it feel like a big event. So I would almost rather err on that side than err on too small timey feeling.
Agree. All right, next mailbag question here, Matt, from Tim. Trine beat multiple highly rated defenses on their way to the title. Interested how you would compare Trine and Calvin and Hope level of defense, which were ranked lower to those highly rated teams.
Yeah, first of all, don't know what's going on with your little logo there, icon. Don't really like that. But other than that, I thought so. For the first game, Hampton, Sydney, and Guilford played high level of defense. To me, it wasn't drastically different defense than those high level MIAA teams that are mentioned, like Calvin and Hope and Trine. I think that's defense we saw from those types of teams all season long, to a large degree, Trinity as well. I know they defended Calvin really well the weekend before, but seeing them up against Trine, from that standpoint, they didn't seem different at all. So I think I don't know. That was my impression, my takeaway. I thought like Calvin's defense that I saw 27 times this year was, right up there with these other Final Four teams.
Yeah, Matt, I went onto d3datacast.com and just took a look. So in the end, Trine played the defenses ranked number 2 and 4 in the final efficiency ratings. And then I went and looked, Matt. Calvin ranked 15, Trine 24, Hope 26. So yeah, what Trine played in that final four, by the efficiency ratings, those defenses were rated higher. But again, we're still talking about, 3 other teams that were ranked in the top 26. That's the top 1/16th. Matt, you know what a quartile is. You know what a percentile is. I had to look up what is a top 16th. That's a hexadecile. So we're all talking about teams in the top hexadecile here. Um, so it probably makes sense that just kind of eyeball test, it didn't really seem a ton different
Yeah.
because I don't think in reality there's a lot of difference between I don't know a defense ranked number 2 and a defense ranked number 26.
Yeah, just
Kind of
looking
just depends on the day, right?
looking at the defensive rating, the difference between Hampton, Sydney, and Calvin was 4 points per 100 possessions, or like 1 point every 25 possessions. So probably not something that you really necessarily notice just by glancing at it. They both look like very good defenses.
One more, Matt. The final mailbag question of the season here comes from Tony. Wants to know, for the mailbag, has there been a school this close from home to win a championship?
I think you did the
Matt,
research.
I fired up the research department for this one, and the answer is no. So Trine is actually by Google Maps exactly 40 miles from campus to the Coliseum. I did look back at the full list of locations and Division III champions.
Men's basketball.
Men's basketball.
Yeah.
The closest I could come, Matt, was 1976. Scranton won the national championship in a game played in Reading, PA. Just a couple other fun notes on this. Augustana hosted the finals, Matt, from 1977 to 1981, and they lost in the championship game. So that would have been the answer. Although I don't know if there's an asterisk because it's an on-campus site.
That would have been real close.
They would have been very, very close to home. And then also in the news and notes department on this topic. So this championship game, we mentioned it set the record for the biggest attendance for a Division III men's basketball championship game. That broke the record previously held by the 1999 game, Matt. That game also featured Hampton-Sydney. They lost to UW-Platteville. That game was played at the Salem Civic Center, and Hampton-Sydney is about 100 miles from the Civic Center. So breaking the record with a team 40 miles away, breaking the record that was previously set with one of the finalists from about 100 miles away.
And that 100 miles is about the same as Scranton to Reading, Pennsylvania. That was also about 100 miles.
Correct.
Cool. All right, Zach.
All right, Matt. Well, Matt, it's kind of sad to see a season come to an end, but, I think there's a lot of thanks. We had some thanks at the beginning of the show. And, of course, thanks to our Patreon members, including our latest Great Job Team supporter, Mike Lefebvre. We get to talk about some D3 national champions and shout out a former D3 national champion here in Mike Lefebvre.
Thanks, everyone, for following us this year. Thanks to everyone on the Good Job and Great Job Team tier list that have decided to partner with us, produce the episodes, make d3datacast.com ad-free. We thank you so much. We thank anyone who follows and supports Division III using the hashtag D3Hoops on social media, liking this video, commenting on this video, giving us any 5-star ratings you want to. It's just so fun to talk about Division III basketball. I think the players, the teams are deserving of discussion, even chatter from kind of random and not intelligent people like you and I, Zach. It's fun to do. We do it because we love it. We thank you for watching, for sharing the episodes, for supporting us in what we do too. It's very, very humbling to talk to people who watch the show or we meet along the way, who've enjoyed what we do a little bit. We do it because it's fun. We do it because the community is great. So we love everyone out there in D3 Hoops land. It was another great season, Zach. I think you and I did a great job, team. But I think all those teams out there did great jobs. So today we're going to say great job, teams, and great job, Trine.
I love it. That's perfect. So we're not going to go away completely, but Matt, we will be shifting into off-season mode. And you said it. All that's left to be said. Good job, team.
Good job, team.